Parkinson's disease. So it's important to understand what's normal and what can be expected, and what a lot of people tell me. When you consider that starting around age 30 or 35, that's when the brain starts to go downhill. But our brain has to last us until we're 100, 110, 115. Most of us are not going to make it that long. But we want to be able to still function and do things effectively. Probably one of the most common things that people notice, even around age 60. Remember, there are a lot of people who are 60 who are still working, and they have experience. But a lot of them will notice that their processing speed slows down. So being able to go through a task very quickly, boom, 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 and we're all done, that slows down. So then what happens is, people use their experience and energy and thought process to be like, how do I work smarter and not harder? There are also many people who tell me that they can't remember that person's name. That seems to be like almost a universal thing. So if you're amazing, I see the stickers on the chest. So, but that seems to be something that's almost universal. So if you are over 60 and you are really great at remembering people's names, that's actually the exception rather than the rule. But the other thing that happens is people will say things, I mean, there are even people who are 45 or 50 who say, I don't feel like my memory is as good. But that's not an age-related thing. That is an attention thing. And so if a person was very able to be attentive and focused, that's one of the biggest reasons why processing time decreases, is because people have less attention span as they get older. And so if they are able to focus, they can probably do things effectively. But there's a diminishing returns between gaining knowledge, experience, and lifetime achievement versus losing brain effectiveness. And so this is why somebody actually did a study on this, and they found that the optimal time to be making amazing financial decisions is actually age 53. And so that's sort of, you're balancing their brain is fully developed at 25, but they need experience to be able to know how to use all that and make better decisions. But then at some point, even a world full of experience may not make up for the loss of attention, processing speed, and things like that. We know that at the highest level of the brain, what's called the cerebral cortex, becomes thinner as a person gets older. Kind of like the hair on my head gets thinner as I go older. And so that's something that affects these types of changes. And so it's not so much that people can't function, it's like, imagine the quality of comprehensive decision making. It's not because of skills, it's because of the number of brain connections between neurons that are talking. And we do lose some of that over time.
Okay, then, yay.
One minor thing I would add to that too is then let's add in that your brain is also a part of your body. So when people have systemic medical conditions or diseases, that also has an impact on a person's brain. And so what we often find is that there are a lot of people who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s who are starting to accumulate chronic medical problems, and those problems have a direct impact on the brain, not even talking about the indirect ones.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that I cannot do as many tasks or do them as, I need more focus. So I can feel a change at 57. I can feel that change happening a little bit. So Kelly,
Yes.
do you want to tell us about some research or things that, because we were kind of talking about brain health, those types of things. Can you talk about what you're working on there?
I would be
Your
happy
research.
to. Yes. So hi again. As you heard, I work for the KU Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, and the research word in there is probably the most important, other than, of course, Rock Chalk Jayhawk. Okay, let me go on. So at KU Alzheimer's, I know. Do you know how much it hurts my feelings to wear this purple representing KU? But I was in the Alzheimer's community long before I was a KU staff person and alum. And so purple is the Alzheimer's color. I'm doing another presentation this afternoon, and they asked me to wear purple, so I figured I might as well go all in. But yes, my employees and fellow Jayhawks do not love this. Anyway, let's talk about the important part with this research. We firmly believe at the KU ADRC that the cure for Alzheimer's disease, the cure, the prevention, the treatment, and for other dementias like Parkinson's is going to come from research, it's going to come from clinical trials. Has anybody taken an aspirin in the last few days? You don't have to raise your hand, but you probably have. The reason you are able to take an aspirin for that headache is because of clinical trials, because of research. And the reason that we won't do this kind of thing anymore at some point, Julie, and Michelle, and Dr. Mohammed,
I have a lot of other topics.
yes, the reason we will go out of business at some point is because there are researchers, not just at KU, but all around the world, working very hard to figure out all the things that Dr. Mohammed said so eloquently and wonderfully, and I'm furiously taking notes so that I can plagiarize his comments at another event, like this afternoon. So, all of the 35 research centers across the country have a focus. We're all looking at the brain, we're all looking at dementias, we're all looking at how to solve this mystery. At KU, our particular focus is metabolism. And metabolism is a fancy word for how your body processes. You might have heard people talk about they have a fast metabolism or a slow metabolism. And the jury is out, I think, on how much control any of us might have over how our metabolism works. But when we metabolize things like food or coffee or alcohol, or we even metabolize the energy that we get from our activity or from our sleep, all of that has an impact on the brain. And so what the researchers at the ADRC are looking at is how can we harness what we know about metabolism to figure out how to increase it, if that's the secret, how to slow it down, if that would be helpful, to figure out how to keep our brains going in light of all the things that Dr. Mohammed told us about the cerebral cortex and about aging over time and about the magic year being 53. I wrote that down. I turned 49 a couple weeks ago, so I got time, is what I heard from that. I got time to still be young and foolish, and then at 53, I'll be good and ready to go. So we know all of those things because of research. And what we're doing at KU in terms of research are lots of different trials that involve medication. Lots of people are very interested in medication trials. And so I can tell you we're working on that. Same thing when you have that aspirin for the headache, we're gonna say, here's a new Alzheimer's drug that you can take. We are at the point of saying, 25 years ago, when Tricia and I worked together, we had Aricept, and it was an oral medication. And you could take it, you could take Aricept every day for years upon years, and you still had Alzheimer's disease. That was an advancement because it used to be you had Alzheimer's and they called it old-timers disease, or they called it senility, or worse, they called it normal aging, and there wasn't anything anybody could do. But because people were willing to participate in research, were generously giving of their time and of their literal selves, we now have Aricept. You take Aricept, we think Aricept slows down the process of the disease moving through the brain and having then that systemic impact on the body. But at the end of the day, at the end of the month, at the end of the life, someone still has Alzheimer's disease. Fast forward to the year 2023-24-ish, and I say fast forward, but of course researchers have been working on this stuff for years, all this time, but by 23-24, we have a new medication that's not an oral pill, but an infusion. Goes right into the body. You go to the Alzheimer's clinic and the clinician gives you the infusion. We know that that infusion works on the biology or the biomarkers of the brain. It works on the plaques that researchers now know appear very often in the brain of someone with Alzheimer's. And we think it slows down the process of the disease. You get a Leqembi or lecanemab infusion, you still have Alzheimer's disease. We are hoping for the day where we can take our magic wand, all social workers have one, at least that's what people think. We can take our magic wand and say, I pronounce you Alzheimer's free. We are not at that day yet. We are going to get there. Dr. Jeffrey Burns, who is the sort of the Patrick Mahomes of the KUADRC, he says we're going to get there. He says we're going to get there in our lifetime. Dr. Burns is, I'm not sure exactly how old he is. He's older than I am, which means if it gets there in his lifetime, hopefully that means my lifetime and all of our lifetimes too. So it's on the horizon because of the research we're doing in terms of, like I mentioned, medications and what they do, and we need to find out what medications don't work as much as we need to find out which ones do work. We were looking at, okay, go ahead. I have lots of more things, but please back me up. Yes, no.
So, because we want to come back to some of that
Yes.
stuff too. And again, we have so much material, we could cover a really a full 3 or 4 days.
Yes.
Did you want to jump in, Rose, too? Otherwise, I want to also just go back to Alzheimer's, but go ahead.
I only
please.
wanted to build on what Kelly was saying.
Yeah.
The other two factors that affect metabolism, how your body cells, including your brain cells, are processing things, would be high quality exercise
Yes.
and sleep quality.
Okay, that's great, and I do think we're gonna come back to that. We have a few slides, both the Parkinson's Foundation and the Alzheimer's Association have some great slides and some, information that will help us to make that better. So, one of the things, if we jump real quick, I think my next slide is dementia. She's talking about some of the advances, but I just wanted to back up just a little bit and talk about some of those different things that fit under that umbrella. It's not all Alzheimer's, actually.
So the biggest question that we get when we're out and about is, what is the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? If you look at the umbrella graphic that we have here, dementia is the umbrella term for the loss of memory and other thinking abilities severe enough to interfere with daily life. So that is what dementia is. So very much like cancer is the umbrella term, and then we have different types of cancer that live under that umbrella. If you look to the right, the most common type of dementia is Alzheimer's. Greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's, does anybody know what that is? It's age. Okay? Greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's is age. In addition to that, underneath the most common types that we see are vascular dementia, which that oftentimes is very closely related to somebody who has heart disease or has a heart condition. Dr. Mohammed mentioned earlier, these other comorbidities or other things that are happening in our body that perpetuate some sort of issue in our brain. That is what vascular dementia is. Lewy bodies is often something that we see with Parkinson's disease as well, or other frontotemporal dementia. That's the one that we see that is in our folks that are younger in age. So diagnosed in the 50s or 60s or younger. And then at the bottom we have this mixed dementia. So we may have a symptom of this type of dementia, or the place in the brain that is affected, which creates a mixed dementia. So you may have separate parts of the brain that are affected, which create a mixed dementia. So you may have a Alzheimer's type, a Lewy bodies type, which then creates a mixed dementia. So to date, we know there's over 200 different types of dementia.
Different types? Okay. Wow, I had no idea. Exactly. I think what I'd like to do is just kind of have you jump in. We have Michelle Square here, Michelle. So this is Michelle Shepard from the Parkinson's Foundation, and just kind of give us a little overview as well. I love that graphic that you had offered too. And I do have another slide here too as well that if you wanted, so just so you know. Yeah.
You bet.
Okay.
Just to give you background on the Parkinson's Foundation and what our mission is, it really is to make life better for people with Parkinson's by improving care and advancing research towards a cure. And everything that we do, we truly build on the experience, the energy, and the passion of our global Parkinson's community. And our goal is to really be a trusted resource for information, education, all the resources that we have here today, speaking engagements like this. We really want to be that partner in the community for folks with Parkinson's as well as their peer partners to really provide them with the information they need to help navigate every stage as well as symptom of the disease. You can advance to the next slide, please. Thank you. With the Parkinson's Foundation, we bring together people with Parkinson's, Those who care for them, we call them care partners. In the Parkinson's community, we like that term versus caregiver. We like care partner because they truly are a partner in that journey. It might be a spouse, it might be a son, a daughter, another loved one, or it might be a friend that's caring for them. But we bring together people with Parkinson's, their care partners, medical providers like Dr. Muhammad, researchers who are looking for that cure, and we bring all these people together in the Parkinson's community as a foundation, and we have 3 strategic pillars that we really focus everything that we do on. We do fundraising every year, and all the funds that we raise go to these 3 strategic pillars that are super important to us as a foundation. The first one is research. We spend millions of dollars every year really looking for long-term treatments and eventually that cure. And we're hoping that cure is more short-term than long-term, but that is constantly on our radar, and we invest millions of dollars there every year. Secondly, we invest heavily in care. We want to make sure anyone with Parkinson's disease has access to the best possible care. And then thirdly, we invest heavily in education, like I said, providing the education and empowerment to the Parkinson's community so that they can live well with the disease, because that is possible. We can educate them how to do that, provide them the resources to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I did have one more. So, just one of you want to just kind of talk about generally outside of, in addition to the research and the things like that. Just you, and if you want to hit more on the research, please feel free to do this. This was just the other slide.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So people often say, what is Parkinson's disease? And I went to medical school back at the turn of the century. It's true. It's true. Which century? But I was trained in a time where we were actually moving away from naming diseases after people. Because James Parkinson lived more than 200 years ago. But what he noticed, he was actually a surgeon in England. He was not even a physician. And what he found was that people in his neighborhood started to have signs of change that looked like they were getting old, even though they were not that old. And so some of them would have like small steps, or they would turn very slowly, or some of them would have tremor at rest in one hand or another, just on one side of the body. Or they might move like they were very stiff. So, here in Kansas, there's a little bit of love lost on the movie The Wizard of Oz, because the Emerald City was in color and Kansas was in black and white.
Yeah.
But if you think about the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz, he would sort of have block-like movements and would move slowly and would be very stiff. That's like the rigidity of Parkinson's disease. And then over time, people would start to have more problems with being able to maintain balance. And even the slightest brush would make them lose balance or have instability of their posture. And so these types of changes that would happen are basically all part of the condition that is Parkinson's disease. 80% of people who have these Parkinsonian findings have regular idiopathic Parkinson's disease, which is like the actual disease. The other 20% of people have something else going on that's causing them to have Parkinsonism. And sometimes it can be things like vascular dementia. Sometimes it can be other medical problems. Even certain infections can increase the risk of Parkinsonism. Sometimes people can have different areas of the brain besides just the very deep brain affected by Parkinson's disease, where they might have incoordination, or they might have higher level thinking or cognitive problems. So there's a lot of overlap, and you'll see the same kind of theme here. Not everybody has something that's very straightforward. There are many of these conditions where people have multiple layers or overlapping features, and that's one of the reasons why I'm a big believer that people should have thorough evaluations to be thinking about what's going on with some of this. And so,
I have a quick question
yes.
for you. Is it like an umbrella, like she was talking about with Alzheimer dementia? Is Parkinson's like the top of is it a
So
big
Parkinsonism is the umbrella, and then 80% of people under that umbrella have Parkinson's disease.
Okay.
So yes, and then the other types of Parkinsonism are much less common, but we run into them and they're out there. And so because being familiar with what that looks like and how to evaluate people, examine them, order tests, and do those things, then we can get some answers. And sometimes it has an impact on like how effective the treatments are. And whether or not people qualify for certain research studies is to have the correct diagnosis rather than just, yeah, you sort of seem like you have Parkinson's disease. So, unlike Alzheimer's, where age is the number one risk factor, there are many people who are actually in the middle part of their age. There are a lot of people in their 40s and 50s who have Parkinson's disease. And there are a lot of people who have never been Parkinsonian until they're 80 or 85, and now they're getting diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, but probably actually have something that's secondary, like dementia with Lewy bodies or vascular dementia that's causing Parkinson's. And so those
So are
details
these
matter.
connected because it's with mostly with our brain? Is that why all these kind of are,
And it depends on which neighborhoods and which regions and of the brain are affected, what people clinically look like. Yes, go ahead.
What is a Lewy body?
Yes, so what happened is, in the past when people would have these conditions, nobody was even had any foggy idea on what was causing them. So when people would die and they would donate their brain to science, there would be pathologists who would study the brain, neuropathologists. And so there was a very famous neuropathologist named Dr. Lewy. Lewy was his last name. And so L-E-W-Y. And so what he found is that people who seemed kind of Parkinsonian and people who ended up having what ended up being named after him, dementia with Lewy bodies, all seem to have abnormal proteins building up in certain types of cells in the body. And especially the dopamine chemical neurotransmitter cells in the brain that are involved in helping people have movement. And so they named these Lewy bodies after him. And it turned out that people with Parkinson's disease and Lewy body dementia and other conditions like multiple systems atrophy can end up having these abnormal Lewy bodies. In fact, building onto the next question, we're going to skip the second one. Who gets Parkinson's? It's thought that abnormal Lewy body or alpha-synuclein protein is building up in different parts of the body first. So some people lose their sense of smell, and then it enters those nerves in the nose. Other people have problems with having slowness of bowel motility. So they start having, instead of bowel movements every day or every other day, they might have twice a week, or even less frequently. And then those alpha-synuclein is in those intestinal neurons. And so then eventually that spreads into the brain and starts causing the movement aspects of Parkinson's disease. And so this is like a process that we're starting to understand the direction of what happens. People who have dementia with Lewy bodies, they have the higher level thinking part, cognitive part of the brain, has Lewy bodies first, and then they gradually become Parkinsonian. People with Parkinson's disease for many years, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, 15 years, they start out having motor symptoms of Parkinson's and then gradually develop cognitive change. And that's called Parkinson's disease dementia. So you might take a snapshot of a person and be like, which one was it? But the history and the story of their life would tell you the answer more effectively.
can you find that, can you get that information while they're still alive, or is it something that you have to get later? I mean, that sounds kind of morbid, but.
Yes, no, it's true. It used to be that the way we would know for sure was an autopsy. But it turns out that in the last year and a half, so when you think about the human history of Parkinson's for over the last more than 200 years, just in the last year and a half, a company has come up with a way where they found that if you take a skin biopsy, which is the least invasive, and it's invasive in your skin, but it's the least invasive way to figure this out, people can have a biopsy of their skin, and it looks for alpha-synuclein in the skin. 93% effective at figuring out whether people have Parkinson's disease. I am surprised there has not been a run on the Parkinson's disease clinic yet. Because in the future, and this goes back to research, if we knew that there were treatments ahead of time before people are having rest tremor or stiffness of a shoulder or balance problems, that they are going to develop Parkinson's disease because they already have the biological evidence of that in their skin, then if we had even 1 or 2 or 3 treatments that would slow the progression, many people who have excellent Parkinson's care, Michael J. Fox comes to mind, Muhammad Ali lived with Parkinson's disease for more than 25 years, we know that they had access to great care. There are many people who get a diagnosis of Parkinson's who can live 10, 15, 20, 25 years. What if we could make that 30 to 50 years? It would just be another chronic condition that people have. Oh, that raised some thoughts. Yes.
So the skin test is, is it like a predictor looking forward if you would be at higher risk, or it's diagnostic that
It is diagnostic that you have alpha-synuclein, and therefore it's going to go to your brain and cause Parkinson's. So we don't have a lot of long-term data on that, but there are many people who act out dreams or sleepwalk as one of the first signs that they're developing Parkinson's. And then sometimes 20 years later, they get a little bit of hand tremor. So they're looking at that more carefully to see how they can predict that. But for as of right now, it's diagnostic. There was another question.
So I had a friend who passed away of Parkinson's, and when she challenged her doctor, why me? One of the things the doctor said, and this was 20 years ago, so there may be more evidence, is that like people of our generation, our 70s and 80s, we lived in a time when there was no air conditioning, and there were no filters filtering the air, and people who especially lived out on farms or large acreage, when they fertilized or they sprayed weeds, that would come into the house and we breathed that in. I always thought it was neurological because of that, all of that attacking our system over the years, but now you're saying it really could be starting in the brain, or it could start anywhere in the body and go to the brain. But is that a factor they're finding that, I mean, if
Like
that happens,
pesticides, are you saying like pesticides? Is
yeah,
that-
yeah, and so if that happened, then the prevention of it would be pretty tough for our generation. Maybe the next generation would be.
100%. And so, you know, I noticed I skipped question 2 because it's complicated. I was going to come back to it. But you're absolutely right. So what happens is, you know, even 15 years ago, it was thought that maybe 3 to 5% of Parkinson's is genetic. Now with the PD gene, PD generation study mapping the future of Parkinson's disease, I just love that Michelle has all these problems. So, you know, but they're looking at like the 7 most common genes, and just from active participation, where people with and without Parkinson's disease have sent blood samples in to look at some of this. Basically, what they're finding now is that about 10 to 15% of Parkinson's disease is genetic, which means that, you know, it was my understanding there would be no math, but 85 to 90% of Parkinson's is not genetic. And so environmental, you know, fills the room, and so we can't always control our environment, but there's been a lot of discussion about what kind of environmental factors are involved. And I would break it down into 3 things. Number 1 would be chemicals that mess with a person's energy production in the body, mitochondria. So like anything that's toxic, that includes things like pesticides, herbicides, and other things that were not readily available in human history until the last 100, 150 years, which is why most of this seems to have started after the Industrial Revolution. James Parkinson wrote his paper in 1817. There were definitely people who were shaky throughout human history, and when you look at scripture in different faiths, a lot of times people will talk about the tremor or the trembling of people who are worried or fearful, or people who have anxiety. And so we know that even enhanced physiological tremor or essential tremor, this is something that has been part of the human condition from time immemorial. But the fact that people have not had Parkinson's-like findings until more recent centuries goes along with an exposure to these types of chemicals and other environmental things. The second type of thing would be viruses. And I don't mean this in a controversial way, but we knew that 100 years ago when people had the Spanish influenza pandemic, that afterward there were many even young people who were institutionalized with Parkinsonism. So if you've ever read the book or seen the movie Awakenings with Robin Williams and Robert De Niro, Robin Williams played the goofy neurologist, and Robert De Niro was the patient who had Parkinsonism, not Parkinson's disease, but Parkinsonism from encephalitis lethargica, from this brain autoimmune, post-viral autoimmune condition that led to Parkinsonism. And then when levodopa came out, which is the most effective treatment still after 50 years for Parkinson's disease, they used it on some of these people who had encephalitis lethargica, and they had awakenings. They were sort of moving better, but it was only a very temporary, I won't ruin the movie or the book for you, but it was sort of a sad ending. But that's where, these environmental, and hepatitis C, which we now have treatments for, which was a huge breakthrough in human history, just in our lifetimes, that we can have treatments where people can be cured of their hepatitis C. That's another big virus that can cause people to have Parkinson's. My own second grade teacher, I found out she had moved away to Florida and now New York City. She had salmonella in 2017. And there's been some research just in the last 5-6 years that people who have salmonella infections are 6 or 7 times more likely to develop Parkinson's disease. That's not a common cause of Parkinson's disease, but these are things that so your environment is very important. And so heavy metals, trichloroethane, which the Environmental Protection Agency is working on trying to ban that. We have some great Parkinson's people who are trying to work on that internationally. The Camp Lejeune incident, people ended up having TCE in the water. Any sports fans, there's an NBA player who's retired now named Brian Grant, and he ended up having Parkinson's at age 37, to the point where it affected his NBA career. That's not 36, 37. That's not a usual age when you have toxic exposures. Agent Orange is actually service-connected through the VA, where people who have toxins that affect your mitochondria. So we know these are other angles. And then, metals would be the third one. So things like manganese or, different types of lead, for example, affect people differently.
Great.
And then we had a question over here.
So, are any of the, the things that cause, that dementia is a symptom of like Parkinson's, Lewy body, Alzheimer's, are they related familiar, like in families? Because my husband has Alzheimer's and he has a brother with vascular dementia and another brother with Parkinson's.
So there can be, and when we see patients, especially when I see people in the hospital and they tell me these stories, we sit down and kind of think through it a little bit more. And so it is possible that there could be a link. Now, all 3 of those are actually very different. So having 2 of the 3 could be related. But here's the other thing. I mean, even 15 years ago, they used to say 5% of dementia is genetic, which means that 95% is due to lifestyle and other factors. But there are always individuals who may be at a higher risk of this, especially if you see clustering. But the problem also among brothers and sisters is that if they grew up in the same house, they were also maybe exposed to the same things. And so depending on what their trajectory of brain change happened, the thing I want to underline, if you take nothing away from all the things that I've talked about so far, if you understand that the effect of what changes happen in a person's brain, these are disorders. They are diseases. They are not just people getting older. These are things that take years to decades to develop, and anything we can do to chip away at this or eventually try to prevent this is what the work of research is doing.
So, Kelly's like, yes, she's a cheer. Yes. I loved it. So some of the slides we have are talking about early detection, and I think for both diseases it's helpful to have early detection. And then we also have slides to help that talk about how to keep your brain healthy. So I want to make sure we kind of get to some of those as well. I believe the next one is, so do you want to go through your 10 early signs, and then I have your slide next that Michelle's are on for you.
I think we covered some of these already,
Yeah,
but let's just kind of run through some of the other ones. So we talk about tremor. It's tremor at rest. People who are shaky with their handwriting or their head or their trunk as they're reaching for things often have something else. Essential tremor is actually 10 times more common than Parkinson's. And a lot of people actually have essential tremor and Parkinsonism. So there's the overlap again. So people have more than one thing. You know, do you have this or that? Yes. A soft or a low voice. This doesn't just mean people talk quietly, but as the sentence goes on, they may talk more quietly. This is because larger movements become smaller movements. That's true with hand movements, it's true with foot movements, it's true with arm and leg movements, it's true with voice movements. Going along with those, I'm going to cut down to 8 here. I'm going across instead of down. They're numbered, actually. I just see that now. So small handwriting goes back to the smallness. You know, there are many people with Parkinson's who are not slow. In fact, some of them are kind of hypomanic. But if they try to go very quickly, what you'll see is that they'll have very small movements. So even if they're not any slower, the movements are smaller, and that interferes with the person's ability to function. Whether they're writing, if your last name is Nishatizada, and you start with nice big letters, by the time you get down about halfway through or to the very end, you're like, you know, that sort of decremental response is bradykinesia. It's the slowness and incoordination of movement. Loss of smell, entering through the nose. Trouble sleeping, more specifically, it's not just problems falling asleep. Some people just have problems staying asleep. Their sleep is fragmented. I need 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Everybody says that. But then you wake up without a cold sweat after 2 hours, and you're like, why am I awake? And then you have a hard time going back to sleep, and so you're not going to function well the next day, which is a vicious cycle. Trouble moving or walking, the constipation we talked about, the soft or low voice, masked face. So that's the smallness or slowness of movement of the facial muscles. One of the biggest things people with Parkinson's disease complain about is they say everybody thinks that I'm like sad. But in reality, I'm still hilarious. And so, like, you know, and this is, you know, the problem. Dr. Stan Fisher, and I've told this anecdote before, he was actually the head of neurology, and he was a movement disorder specialist at St. Luke's for a number of years. He used to tell an anecdote, and he would draw 2 circles side by side, and he would draw a semicircle underneath the bottom, and he would say, "What is this?" And people would say, "It's a smiley face." And he would say, "No, it's 2 circles and a semicircle." But what happens is, we have learned, this is, even animals do this, to read the situation. So if somebody's smiling, it means that they're happy, or they're not going to be a threat. If they're grimacing or making angry eyes, or, you know, you're like, okay, wait a minute, was this something I said or did? So these are things that we do as we try to interpret. So if we interpret a person with Parkinson's who has a masked face, it's normal that we would assume that they're like sad or don't have a lot of energy. But this is the problem with, and this is why we have emojis now, right? So emojis on text actually show you like what sort of feelings people have.
If you do them correctly, right?
That's
You don't hit the
That's
wrong
right.
one.
Like my pet peeve is
That can
the
mess people
one.
up.
My pet peeve is the one where the mucus is coming out of the nose, and people use that instead of the crying. It's like, no, that's a runny nose. Location matters. Real estate, right?
Yes.
Dizziness or fainting, people can actually have blood pressures that start to drop when they sit up or stand up. And this is not unique to Parkinson's. There are many people with vascular dementia and other chronic problems, including diabetes, where people can end up not getting good blood flow to the brain, and they feel very lightheaded or dizzy, on top of the cognitive or movement problems of Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. And then stooped or hunching over. This is called flexed posture. So if I stand up, I try to have good posture. If I end up having truncal flexion, and then arm flexion, and then wrist flexion, and then finger flexion and thumb flexion, and all of these angles are much more acute. Then even though I'm only 46 years old, I start to move like a person who's older. And this is why from far distance people are misdiagnosed.
Okay. Well, can we keep switching gears here back and forth too? Oh, you want to say, yes, please, yes.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, and we have this flyer on the page on everybody's table, the 10 early signs. If you choose to take that with you, you're welcome to. It's important to note that you might have one of these signs. You might have multiple of these signs. Just because you have one, it does not mean you have Parkinson's. That's really important to note, because when I first started with the foundation, I was doing online learning. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have Parkinson's. I have several of these. And that's common. That is common. But what it is it's a nice way for you to have that conversation conversation with your physician at your next well visit of, hey, I've noticed that I have X, Y, and Z. Can we just talk about that? But not to be alarmed by, it's just to help you to watch for those signs and symptoms.
Thank you, thank you. I want to talk about the early signs for Alzheimer's or dementia as well. So you guys have a sheet on your page. It's not actually a slide. It's a handout that you should, right? What do you see? Okay. Okay, so the 10 early warning signs. So number 1 is memory loss that disrupts daily life. So this could be something that you need to, in order to remember to do something, you need to use a visual aid, or something that is disrupting your daily interactions. If it happens on a daily basis, if it's a one-off and you have forgotten to do something, and 6 months from now that something similar happens, I think it's important to remember that this is something that disrupts your life on a daily basis. Okay? Number 2 is difficulty completing familiar tasks. So this could be following a recipe that you have completed for many years, tasking, following and making sure that you do it in the correct order. Could be something like paying your bills, sitting down to write a check. Now all of a sudden you've forgotten how to do that. So daily tasks. Number 3, I did the same thing, Dr. Muhammad. I went down instead of across. Okay, let's go back to number 2. Challenges in planning or solving problems. So that is my the page paying your bills, writing a check. That is where I was, but I went to the wrong number. Number 3, we covered difficulty completing familiar tasks. Number 4, confusion with time or place. So this could be that oftentimes I use the example of somebody who's gone to church their whole life. It's on Sunday morning at 9 o'clock, and all of a sudden they show up at 9 p.m. on a Sunday. Number 5, trouble understanding visuals or images or spatial relationships. This is one that I don't think people often know about. As the disease progresses in the brain, you lose your spatial relationships in each step of the way. So it starts out with having blinders, then it goes to binocular vision, and at the very end of the disease, it's monocular vision. So oftentimes, when we talk about approach, when we talk about training for those living with dementia, we want to make sure that we keep in mind those spatial relationships. So somebody who may be having issues with driving, that may be what's going on. They may be having some changes with their spatial relationships. Number 6, new problems with words in speaking or writing. So that room I sleep in, we're not able to say the bedroom. We're not able to recall that word. Number 7, misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace our steps. Guys, normal aging, we've all done this. We've headed to the kitchen. By the time we get to the kitchen, we're like, why on earth did I come in here? The difference is you're able to retrace your steps and remember that. If you have dementia, you're not able to retrace your steps. It's just gone. You have no idea why you were going in the first place. Number 8, decreased or poor judgment. I think about our poor little seniors that are preyed upon, right? Somebody comes to their door and convinces them to write a check for $5,000. That would be decreased or poor judgment. Number 9, withdrawal from work or social activities. I use the church example here as well. Somebody's gone to church every single week, and now all of a sudden Betty doesn't show up to church, just completely out of the blue. Chances are Betty knows something's going on, and she doesn't want to be around people that may notice. So socially withdrawing from a friend group or church or even your children. And then often we see this in spouses as well. The spouse will often mask for the person with the disease. So not only are we missing Betty, but now Betty and Bob, neither of them are coming to anything because they don't want to cause or draw attention to that. And then number 10, changes in mood or personality. Someone who has always been
super prim and proper now may be cussing like a truck driver. Completely off key, right? Somebody who is like, yeah, I never heard them say a cuss word at all, and now they're, or somebody who's always been very pleasant is now very agitated. So changes in mood and personality. Kelly?
And I suppose that's similar to Parkinson's, because you have, just because you have one or two of these doesn't mean,
Very much so,
that
yes.
you have dementia.
Right.
Or,
It means you should go to the doctor and figure out what's going on.
That's right, and what I would add to that is so much of your list mentions change or new. If you've got someone who's always kind of been a scatterbrain, never has been good at balancing a checkbook, never did show up on time, that just means that's how they are. That's how they've been for their whole life. If you have someone who is newly behaving in some of these ways, using words you didn't know your grandma knew, newly not being able to cook a Sunday dinner, changing their ability to drive and park in a straight line, those are things you especially want to pay attention to. You want to pay attention to any of these things that happen at any time to anybody of any age. You want to be even more aware of them in someone when they are a departure from what's historic or what's normal, keeping in mind that what's normal for some of us might not be normal for any of us. And I'll just give one more plug. If and when you do see these signs in yourselves or someone else, do not just say, oh, well, I guess I'm 79 now. Speak up, talk to your doctor. If you are a Medicare beneficiary, you are entitled to an annual wellness visit every year that Medicare covers at 100%. And that is absolutely a time when you can and should say, doctor, this page feels really familiar to me for myself or someone else. What do we do about it? Early detection and early diagnosis of any of the dementias, in particular Alzheimer's, and I would assume Parkinson's as well, is vastly more effective than later detection. We cannot be ostriches. We cannot just say, oh well, I will just ignore this, because it will not go away. You will better be able to manage it if you go get some brain scans, talk to your doctor, get a baseline on your chart. 6 months from now, if you're still the same, well, okay, good. If you're not the same, we've got to have an intervention.
So it was either Michelle or Mohammed that talked about the importance of, Dr. Mohammed, sorry, of early detection. So as Kelly mentioned earlier, Leqembi, or lecanemab, is, what we know about that is it's super effective for somebody in the early stages of diagnosis. So the infusion. So at the point that you feel like something is going on, it's super important to go and be checked, because if you wait, then you may be past, the point where it may be effective. So it's important to remember.
okay, so I'd like to do two things in the next 10 minutes and then give you a little bit of time for questions. So I would love to know from you guys, what are some ways that we can prevent, I don't know if that's even, or once we're maybe, if you find some of this out early on, what are some things you can do to slow the progression? So maybe just a couple things from both sides. And then also, I know there's research and ways to be involved in research, and I just kind of like to touch on that. And if they have questions, then they can come ask you afterwards. But for sure, let's touch on that, because there's ways to be involved in some of the research and help that out, and get some kind of free healthcare, right? Some free options. So if you guys want to start with just ways, just healthy. We do have a 10 healthy habits, but I'd love for you to speak to a couple of them.
So regarding Parkinson's disease, right now, prevention is not something that we have available for sure. There are a lot of very intelligent basic science researchers and clinical researchers who are putting their minds together to look at several angles, which I think will be, this is not going to be something that sneaks under the radar. This will be on the nightly news. When these things become available, it'll be a huge breakthrough, and it won't be mysterious. Some of the things they're looking at are targeting that alpha-synuclein protein that are building up. There are at least 3 different vaccine trials that are going on. Where imagine if somebody could have a shot twice a year. It's not like a flu shot where you could just get by with one. But it would basically prevent the abnormal alpha-synuclein protein from building up. That would be an arrest in the disease. So that would be something where a person could live 30 to 50 years with Parkinson's disease because it's not even able to accumulate to even build up in brain cells. So that's a very realistic angle, and with different companies working on that, I'm very excited about that. The other thing are alpha-synuclein aggregation drugs. So there are other treatments that are either pills or infusions that people could receive that actually prevent the alpha-synuclein from building up or misfolding in a way where that toxic protein is causing brain cells to die. So that's different than a vaccine, but it would be working on a similar type of target. And then the third is something that hasn't worked historically, but as science has been improving as far as like the research quality has improved and we're further along in the understanding, is actually stem cells. People were talking about stem cells 20 years ago, and in fact, when I was a fellow getting movement disorder training in Houston, somebody had published a study where they had done stem cells, implanting them in a person's brain, but then some of these people, were not doing well. They were trying cutting-edge treatments like stem cells. Some of them had passed away. And so when they did autopsies, they found out that even the stem cells were starting to have Parkinson's changes. So it's not the cells, it's the neighborhood. It's the environment. And so, but as stem cell technology improves, that's going to be a way where maybe the stem cells could change the neighborhood and actually have an impact. And so they're still working on that as a reasonable possibility. But for as far as treatment, there are many treatments. There are well over 25 FDA-approved treatments for Parkinson's disease. But most doctors I know have never even heard of one. And so this is why seeing a movement disorder specialist, which according to Parkinson's Foundation research, only 9% of people in the United States have a movement disorder specialist. 50% are seeing a general neurologist, and the rest are not even seeing a neurologist. And so this is the shortage and why we're trying to recruit and train people, is because right now, if you want to try to get in Kansas City with a movement disorder specialist, the wait times are at least 5 to 7 months. And that's only because we added 2 more recently. In July, it was an 18-month waiting list. So treatments are available. A lot of these are medications. Some of them involve surgery, things like deep brain stimulation, functional ultrasound, duodenal levodopa through a feeding tube. These are ways to get the dopamine levels in the brain evened out. But many people don't have access to these treatments because their doctors even are not aware of what the treatments are for Parkinson's. They're like, here's your pills, and that's it. And then the pills are only covering them maybe 1/3 of the day, or half of the day. And there's all this time where they're not moving well because the medicines wear off. So knowledge is power, and being aware that there are resources people can do better. It doesn't have to be that you go see a movement disorder specialist the rest of your life. Go see them once or twice, get in a better situation, and then you could go back to your doctor.
Are there any things that people can do to pre-diagnosis, or things that
To keep the disease away.
kind of keep it away?
Prevent it, yes.
Is that, no?
So prevention is not something that's realistic unless we take it to the stadium level, which is like, how do we ban some of these substances that are toxic, and what kinds of things can be done about that? And I grew up in the 1980s, was when I was in elementary school. And I remember reading books from the 1960s that were for kids, talking about how they banned DDT. So many of you were around for that, and you remember that. And people took that seriously, and there were some people who were like, that's not a big deal, you guys are just protesting. And that's like, this is how it always is. But if you are going to make changes that are going to affect people, you have to think about removing toxic substances and having treatments for viruses that cause Parkinson's. Like, I snickered a little bit when I heard about once all these things are cured, we're not going to have a job. Because I think that's such a slow process. There will be something else we'll have to deal with, whether it's Huntington's disease or cerebellar ataxia or whatever. But I would love to hear that day in my lifetime where it's like people no longer have to die of Parkinson's disease.
Sure. I'll add,
Prevention or
yeah.
just quick research that
Yeah.
you want to think?
I'm fascinated to hear Dr. Mohammed's notes about Parkinson's disease and not looking at a prevention. And I'm hopeful, I hope I have to be, that might change one day. We are having conversations about prevention of Alzheimer's disease. Now you're all gonna sit up and with your pen and write down the next thing I say, because you probably think I'm going to say, and the thing you can do to prevent Alzheimer's disease is, and I'm not gonna do that to you because I cannot promise that to you. However, because KU is a center for Alzheimer's research that is especially looking at metabolism, we are looking at food. We are looking at diet and nutrition. And Julie, I don't know if you can put up the slide that I have with the avocado picture. That's okay. Pictures are helpful.
My husband here to run.
There you go. So, there you go. So you heard at the early part of this conversation, both Michelles talked about the question that they get most often. What is the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's? Probably the next question we get after that is, what can I eat or not eat to not ever have Alzheimer's disease? I cannot address Parkinson's. I can address Alzheimer's, and I can tell you that you certainly recognize that that's an avocado on the top right of the screen, and it's a heart-shaped avocado. That's an AI avocado. I've never seen an actual avocado that looks like that. However, we are right now doing a study at the KU ADRC that is looking at avocado intake and cognition. The name of the study is AVOCOG. Researchers are really very punny and clever when they come up with these names for things. What we're looking at in terms of avocados is we have two groups. We have one group that is eating one avocado every day for 12 weeks. That's 84 avocados. That's a lot of avocados. And you don't have to just eat it. You can make guacamole, you can make avocado toast, you can have sushi, and then the fish in the sushi probably is also good for your brain. Anyway, one avocado a day for 12 weeks. Our hypothesis is that that's going to improve cognition. How are we operationalizing improving cognition? We're not saying that eating 84 avocados means you will never get Alzheimer's disease. But we do think that omega-3 fatty acids and the other good stuff about avocados is going to lead to better, or at least not worse, cognition. So avocados we think are quite helpful. Just yesterday, and I didn't put this in the slide because this is really kind of confidential, but I'll tell you anyway. Just yesterday, I learned that our research team is wanting to do a similar study to the avocado study, but instead of avocados, they're going to look at, drumroll, peanut butter. Peanut butter, we think, has some of the same properties that avocados have.
When will you be enrolled?
Third next question. Sometime this year, I think. And in all seriousness, here's my plug. If you go pick up any of the information on my table over here, you can sign up for our newsletter to find out, one, if you can be in the avocado study, and two, when we might have the peanut butter study. But don't tell anybody you heard it from me until it's official, then you can't give me the credit, okay? So we're looking at those food things that might be helpful. Let me tell you, we're trying real hard to get an egg study because eggs are so expensive, and we provide the avocados, we'll provide the peanut butter. So if we find out that eggs are good for your brain, we'll provide eggs, and everybody will be very happy about that. So we're looking at eggs. That was for you. We're looking at avocados as a possibility. Red wine, dark chocolate, blueberries are also thought to be protective of your brain, in moderation in all things, including moderation, right? The other thing that I just have to mention, because I have the picture on here, you have a study called FIGHT AD. I don't remember what FIG stands for, but the HT is for either heat therapy or hot tubs. So yes, we're looking at whether the heat from a hot tub is protective of one's cognition. It is an amazing study. I have a hand raised. Are you going to ask me how you can get in the hot tub?
No.
Okay.
What about Prevagen that they add?
Prevagen. Hold that thought for just a second. See, test your brain and see if you can remember, and we'll answer that. The hot tub study is looking at whether heat therapy, specifically heat from a water source, is good for your cognition. And we're asking people to come and get in the hot tub at KU 3 times a week. I know. What a sacrifice. 3 times a week, 3 different hot tubs, one that's hot, one that's hotter, one that's hottest. And the thought is that one of those, all 3 of them are going to be good for you. Which temperature is like ideal?
What about a sauna?
What about a sauna? I don't know. I think for now, I think it has to be water, steam. I don't know if a sauna will work, but listen, the sauna and the hot tub industry, when they find out about this, they're all gonna go on sale, so you heard it here first. And then thirdly, we're doing a study called Aroma, because as you heard about Parkinsonian issues and Alzheimer's and other dementias, sometimes loss of sense of smell is a warning sign. As we get older, all of our senses are less useful for us. I mean, look at how many of us are wearing glasses, and we have hearing aids, and we put too much or too little salt in the food, and our sense of smell changes. COVID also brought that to light for a lot of us. So we're doing a study on what the sense of smell does for cognition. And then lastly, this is maybe my favorite study because I'm not old enough for the hot stove study, you have to be 65, but I can participate in the menopause study. We're looking at whether menopause has an impact on future increased risk of Alzheimer's disease. So we're looking for women aged 40 to 60 to track their sleep, report their hot flashes. Thank you for letting me have one this morning when the temperature was higher in here. Anyway, so we're not just looking at people that are, far into the disease process. We're always looking for people with what we call normal cognition to see how we can keep your brains normal. I mean, is the answer 84 avocados? Maybe it is. Is it sitting in a hot tub? Maybe it is. And so these are just four of my most interesting studies that I can tell you about. What I want you to take from that is that research is happening. Research is what's going to get us to the prevention or the cure. Prevention, real quick, won't hurt you, probably won't help you, is what our neurologists say. Dr. Muhammad might have more to say
So
about
does
it.
anybody know where the chemicals from Prevagen come from? Close to squid. Getting warmer. Jellyfish. Third time's the charm. So it's actually a protein that is very non-specific. It actually blocks calcium channels in the brain, and so there are many effects of that. And so all I can say, without being too political about this, is that the Federal Trade Commission actually told the company that makes Prevagen that they need to cease and desist from publicizing claims that could not be backed up by any. So when the advertisement is better than the outcome, then we know that's skeptical. But this is one of the most common questions that get asked is about Prevagen because it's still available and people still take it. But I agree. I mean, I don't think there's anything harmful in it necessarily where people are going to have a lot of side effects. But on the contrary, if you got in a hot tub, ate some avocados, peanut butter, eggs, and it didn't help your brain one bit, I'm sorry.
But you had a good time.
Okay, let's do one question, then I know you've had.
Has anyone participated in a KU study?
I'm in a blood pressure study.
Oh,
In a
okay.
blood pressure study.
Okay.
I'm in my second year.
AstraZeneca. Okay, anybody else?
We have, but it wasn't for Alzheimer's, it was for prostate.
Okay, yeah. I just looked up on my phone, it's 6 years right now that I started a study. I have a problem, I'm 89, and you don't want me in.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
But it's fantastic, and it was a food plan study for 3 years, and I pretty much continued with it. Avocados was not at the rate that you're offering.
Oh, goodness.
And I pretty much stuck with the diet, and I feel good, and I like it, and I.
Well, you look amazing.
You know, I've got two really cool things in my life, and one of them was participating in the study, and the other was fitness.
That's good. That's on our list, our 10 healthy habits, so that's good. Okay, I think we need to kind of, do you guys want to say one last thing before we close? And then will you stick around for a few questions? And they have some materials. You can even take some to your friends over there. So let's do one last comment if you each want to do that. And then we have a gift basket giveaway. We have a drawing, and then a few other things to say. So go ahead.
All right, speaking for Parkinson's disease, and I'll hand it off to Dr. Muhammad as well. I think the big takeaway that I want you to have is that although you can't prevent a Parkinson's disease diagnosis, it is a disease that you can live well with. If you do all the things, the proper nutrition, if you exercise regularly, if you take the medications, there's so many things that you can do to ensure that you still have a good quality of life. And I hope that gives hope to folks who are impacted by this disease.
Absolutely, and I want to reiterate and clarify, there are people working on preventatives. I just don't have something for you to take home today to prevent Parkinson's disease. So a lot of great work is being done on that. I think the biggest thing I would take away from all of this is that chipping away is effective. People often don't have one problem. The reason why we don't have a solution for Parkinson's or Alzheimer's disease with one thing that you can go home and do is because it's a layered problem. But what if there were 30 things that were available, whether it's lifestyle, diet, sleep, stress, exercise, metabolism, and you did 12 of those 30 things? You would be much less likely to have brain disease. And so I guess my final comment would be that if you think about people who exercise all the time, eat healthy, try to limit their stress, being super active, doing all these things, we call them health freaks, right? But that's the problem, is if any of us were even able to make some small changes in our life meaningfully, we would probably lower our risk. And that's because all these different pathways are being affected to cause these brain conditions. So it's not just one big thing.
I'll say ditto to my Parkinson's colleagues here, and I'll add, give yourselves a pat on the back for coming out today, because as you heard, social isolation is a contributing factor, not just to Alzheimer's and other brain disorders, but to your quality of life. So get out. Kansas City has finally gotten itself together and decided that spring is here. So get out, be with other people, learn something new. It's important to keep those wheels turning in your brain. So I think all of you have probably learned at least one new thing today. Keep doing that, and you will find that your brain is really energized by that. And I will say again, thank you to my person who I in no way asked to say that she enjoyed KU research. But also I want to make sure you know that we recognize participating in research is a gift from you to us. And in response to that, we offer usually pretty good compensation. We're not buying you, I don't want you to think that. But we are thanking you for participating in this study. Sometimes there is financial compensation, there is always deep, deep gratitude from a whole lot of people, including those people who are just getting new to this world and finding out, oh no, someone I love has dementia, what do I do? And we can answer them because people have given of their time and their talent. So thank yourselves for being here today. Thank you from all of us for being here today.
So we've talked a lot about healthy habits. I think everybody has kind of interjected. I was just looking at the list, and I think we've talked about all of our 10 healthy habits except for protecting your head. That is one that people often forget about. So if you're a bike rider, or if you have any opportunity to have some sort of an accident that you need to protect your head, make sure that you do that, because as we know, traumatic brain injury is going to just perpetuate some other brain situation. But I think you have it in your packet, our 10 healthy habits. It's very much what we've always known about lowering risks for any other disease process. Dementia or Alzheimer's is no different, or Parkinson's. So it's all very relative, what we've been told our whole lives. It's just a matter of combining all of those together, like Dr. Muhammad said.
And thank you for reminding me about that. So they've actually looked at this, and within the 10 years before people start to develop motor symptoms of Parkinson's, there is a huge number of people who have had at least one head injury. It may be a concussion, it may be that they fell and hit their head. So is that a contributor or a trigger to unlock the effects of environmental toxins and metals and dietary things? The answer is very likely.
Well, let's end on that positive note. Thank you. Real quick, just some housekeeping things, and then we'll say thank you to you. There is a most of them are, there's two different colors. These are the surveys. If you could just let me know how you felt about the seminar, that sounds great. There's a lot of information here. There's some slides. I'm happy to share any of that information. Or if you need any information, I'm happy to mail it to you or to email it to you. So put that down as well. If you are interested in registering for the next seminar, the next two seminars, put that down as well. The next one's going to be very interesting. We're going to talk with some financial advisors, attorneys, elder law, and talk about ways that we can pass on our legacy to our next generation, or to, research, right? I'll take that one. And then I wanted to mention, as far as our education partners, we have Santa Marta. They're going to have a gift basket giveaway, so if you want to come on up here. But they also have a memory care unit, as well as Garden Villas. They have a memory care unit if you're needing, or space. And I know that Senior Helpers, they do a support group for memory care, and you are also certified. You have a special training section for helping your staff learn about memory care, correct?
We do a virtual dementia tour for all of our caregivers.
Yeah, so they're very versed in that, and if you're around 53, we have some financial planners here. And if you're not 53, then you better, and you haven't done it, you better see them fast, or send your children that way. So let's do a quick giveaway here. What else did I remember? Just that I appreciate you all coming, but let's do your gift basket. You want to bring your basket up here? Sure. This is our fancy list here.
I feel like I should offer to carry it to your car because it's very.
Okay, well, good. And then I also want you to say just a little bit about Santa Marta. I'll let you do that first, and then draw.
This has been great, by the way. I'm Heather McCoy. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing from Santa Marta Senior Living Community, which is about 3 miles west. We're on 45 beautiful acres. And we are a life planning community, so the idea is that you could move into an independent living apartment as your needs change. You need assisted living, memory care, there's a place for you. So please come and take a card. I welcome any of you to just come and take a tour with me, even if you're not looking. Have some lunch. I do like to tell people the beauty of a senior living community, to your point, is community. So there are always people around, and people always say, oh, I'm not ready. I say, move into a community before you think you're ready so you can actually enjoy it. So thank you all for coming, and I hope someone wins this lovely basket. Right, Ray Jean. There you go.
Let's give a round of applause for all of our wonderful panelists. Thank you so much. Appreciate all your knowledge and your time. So, and thank you. Come back and see us, and if you have any questions, stick around. So thanks so much. Have a great week.
Yeah.